Hey guys, it's Mark.
And this is Michelle.
And another episode of This is Mark and Michelle post-Thanksgiving. And how are you guys today?
We didn't eat any no foods, but we did have a lot of fat.
We did, but that's all right. We know how to counteract that by not eating more fat. So
also lots of lime water.
Yeah, that works too. So hopefully you guys had a good day yesterday, whether it was Thanksgiving or not for you. And we are back with a little bit more of the autism lingo or jargon words or technical words or whatever you want to call it. And we finished up with, I think, with explicit. Not yesterday, but on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And so we're going to start with face blindness today. And there's another, I think the technical term for that is prosopagnosia. And weird word, but basically it means not being able to recognize somebody's face, even if they're relatives. And I'll give an example. Back in the 80s, I remember my parents came to visit me at college, and when they came in, I didn't even know who they were because I couldn't recognize their faces.
You never tell me that.
And I'll fill you in on the rest of the story later, since I don't guess I've ever told you that.
No.
And but anyway, and it was odd because I'm like, well, I know my parents are supposed to be visiting. Who are these people walking up to me? That's what my brain was saying.
Huh.
And so,
wow.
Yeah, I didn't recognize my mom or my dad. And which was odd, I thought then. Apparently, I had a brain that wasn't completely connected to the autism, so to speak, because I could recognize odd things. Why wouldn't I recognize my own parents? You know, stuff like that. And I remember in my last year of high school, 87, there was a guy was in one of my classes. His name was Glenn. And yeah, had to be about 15, 18 years later, maybe more like 18 years later. I happened to see Glenn somewhere else at a big bookstore I was working at, and I didn't recognize him. And the only way I knew it was him is because I was helping him look for a book, and we special ordered it, and I noticed his name. And I was like, oh, hey, are you Glenn McCoy that went to Tucker High School back in, you know? And he said, yeah. I said, hey, I was in your class, you know. He's like, oh, yeah, you know. Didn't recognize his face. I did recognize his face after I saw his name, but it's
now
interesting.
Everybody's going to be looking for Glenn McCoy.
Yeah, right. And they're going to find hundreds and hundreds of Glenn McCoys. So there'll be a line outside the door. Is this the Glenn McCoy? No, that's not the Glenn McCoy. That's a Glenn McCoy. Right? But face blindness, it is an issue because I've heard of lots of adults on the spectrum as well as kids on the spectrum not recognizing people that they know, even relatives, even family members. And it becomes an issue because you work with people, and then a few days later, if you haven't seen them in a few days, you may encounter them a few days later and go, hi, I'm such and such. And you'll say that to them as if you're reintroducing yourself, and they're looking at you like you're crazy because they met you a few days before. And, you know, I think that's partly short-term memory, and then partly the inability to recognize shapes and things for an autistic brain.
Probably metals in that section of the brain.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So
I was reading about schizophrenia this morning.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen medical mediums speak to it, but his the person he trained, Muniza, said that it is definitely metals. Wow, something got me.
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't know where I was going with that. So
she said it's metals and schizophrenia.
Yeah,
Okay.
It had to do with face blindness. I don't know what I was thinking. Oh, it was where the metals are deposited.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, I can see that.
Just go on.
What area of the brain? All right, we're going to move on to the next term, forgiveness as a healing technique. And because truthfully, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's the only reason forgiveness exists, is as a healing technique.
Right.
What else would it be for?
Yeah.
For you to lord it over somebody else? Forget that. That's not forgiveness. That's arrogance and meanness. But in this case, forgiveness as a healing technique is a ritual to relieve oneself of the pain of a situation by releasing that pain to a higher power, whatever that may be to you. And so one that you've heard us talk about, well, a couple that you've heard us talk about, is the forgiveness prayer, which is, I forgive Mother, Father, God.
I forgive myself. Mm-hmm. I forgive all those involved. Forgive us, Mother, Father, God. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Right. And then for me, I just have a ritual in my head where I envision me handing off whatever pain I have to a divine feminine source, whoever that is, and then she and I take it and put it in a lotus flower in a river and let it float away. So, and I like that. I think that's a good creative visualization for me. But basically, that forgiveness is something that we wind up having to do every day.
Yes.
To be honest. And even though I don't do it every day, I'll admit that, I do have to come back every few days and forgive a situation somewhere, either in the past or the present. And because of that, it winds up being a constant practice. And
it can become a mantra.
It can be. And that being the case, forgiveness winds up being incredibly useful in helping you towards your path to peace. Mm-hmm. Right? And so that's why we talk about it a lot, because I'm finding, and you've heard us talk about this too, if you've been a long-time viewer, that as I've recovered, I've found emotions in there that I didn't know existed inside me, that I didn't know existed, and I've had to use lots of forgiveness on those things, on those old emotions and old traumas, just so I can move on. And Michelle herself can tell you that even though she's always felt the emotions, she still constantly has to use forgiveness on very old stuff, because sometimes there's little pieces and vestiges of it that come up.
Yeah, it's mm-hmm. like you peel an onion.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't get to the core, it doesn't all go away. So you have to keep peeling. And so the peeling is the forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. So forgiveness is definitely a useful tool to have in your emotional and spiritual toolbox. So
before we go on, I thought maybe it would be interesting to talk about the movie we watched last night for the rest of the show.
Oh.
What do you think?
Let's do that. That's fine. Because what was it, last year or maybe way earlier this year, we talked about my experiences watching movies that I had seen in the past, but that I have recently re-seen or rewatched.
Right.
Re-seen might be a newly coined term, but you guys may have heard us talk about back in 2016. Michelle and I sat down and watched Moonstruck and When Harry Met Sally. Now, I had been on recovery for about 3 years at that point.
Yeah, and that was gaps.
So
he wasn't where he is now.
Not at all. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And so, excuse me. So, when we did that back in 2016, I actually saw interactions through their eyes and face, between Sharon Nicholas Cage and Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal. I saw interactions between them that I had never seen before. And now, Moonstruck, for those of you who know the movie, those of you who don't, it's about a woman who falls in love against her will, so to speak, and winds up dumping her fiance, which is the brother of the guy she falls in love with, and winds up marrying the new guy she falls in love with. So anyway, it's a great movie. It's a pretty straightforward movie because it's about Italians.
Italian
Americans.
They don't hide their emotions.
And they pretty much speak whatever they need to speak, right?
Yeah.
And which is interesting because that is easy to decipher, to decode. You know, everybody's explicit, everybody's loud, and everybody's emotional, so you get it, right? And When Harry Met Sally, when we saw that movie, it was funny. Back when I saw it in 2016, I saw a good bit more than I had ever seen in that movie before in the interactions between the two. But it still didn't seem to be as enlightening as watching Moonstruck, right? So last night, we bought When Harry Met Sally, and we watched that. So this is 3 years after I had seen it the last time. And this is after being on the medical medium for almost 2 years.
Almost 2.
Right? And detoxing heavy metals and healing my brain up and this kind of stuff. Well, When Harry Met Sally, when we watched that last night, I saw like 10 times more than I ever saw when we saw it 3 years ago. I saw all the reticence on her part and on his part, and his refusal to deal with his feelings, and her anger at his refusal to deal with his feelings, and her naivety and all that kind of stuff. And it was a much more difficult movie to figure out, though, because they weren't explicit about anything. It was all hidden. It was all facial expressions, all body language, and you had to figure out what was going on, and you had to figure out the subtleties by figuring out the subtle body language. And
good actors, man.
yeah, and I had never done that, never had to do that before. But it was a very instructive movie, because when you're in your late 40s and early 50s and you recover from autism, probably from other chronic illnesses as well, but I'm speaking about autism, there are so many developmental gaps in your social knowledge and your emotional knowledge that you're still way behind. And so seeing When Harry Met Sally last night, I think has caught me up a lot.
Yeah.
You're
going to be seeing more stuff now.
Yeah, exactly.
At work, you're going to be going.
Well, and most of my friends at work, like 80-90% of them are women. So, and these women, I wouldn't say these women are as subtle as Meg Ryan on When Harry Met Sally, but they're also not explicit either. And so they're kind of a mix between. And so it's been it'll be very helpful in seeing things and figuring them out, because I had to stop the movie just like we did 3 years ago and ask her about questions, or she'd say, "Hey, stop it." And then she'd go, "What went on there?"
Yeah, what just happened? Did you see what she did?
Mm-hmm. And, well, there's a scene when Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan are in a museum where he's talking about the pepper. There's too much pepper on my paprikash. Well, she says she has a date. Billy Crystal, his character, is upset, and but he doesn't say so.
No.
Well, then he says, "Oh, that's great that you have a date," but then she's upset. Yeah. Well, it took about 5 or 6 minutes of talking with her to figure out what was going on, and I had to sit there and think about it, because it's not immediately obvious. When you don't grow up seeing those interactions take place between people, you have to learn those later on, if you want to be able to operate well in a social environment. And so seeing all that stuff was eye-opening, because it was like, oh man, there's even more layers underneath all of the shallowly implicit stuff. There's deeper implicit stuff, And so it's been very interesting to rewatch that movie this time around, because I got about 1/10 of the stuff the last time, and I thought I got a lot.
The first time, how much did you get? Did you see it?
Did we watch it in the 90s, you and I, when we first met?
Did you see it at the theater or not?
No.
Yeah.
And
probably in the 90s, because I loved that movie.
Yeah, and I'm sure I didn't get any of it then,
probably
because
not.
None of it stuck in my head, And then back 3 years ago in 2016, when we watched it, I got some of it, but I got lots more of it now, And
I feel like you got all of it last night.
Yeah.
After we talked.
Maybe not all of it, but close to it, like 95%. So, because I still think there's probably a little bit more learning to do, but it's been fascinating to see interactions that I never could see when I was autistic. That part of your brain just doesn't work well. And personally, I don't think that's an advantage. I think it's a disadvantage because human brains are built to be that way. They are built to be social and implicitly communicative. All right, there's a word for you.
Yeah.
And because of that, when you can't recognize all that implicit communication, you're at a disadvantage. Maybe in hundreds of thousands of years, maybe we won't be so implicitly communicative.
Right, we'll be so full of medals, nobody will be able to do that anymore.
Exactly. But right now, that is fact. That humans are social and implicitly and explicitly social. But it seems to me that far more gets communicated implicitly and socially than explicitly. So depending on your culture. But it was really fun to watch that because I could actually see Sally being naive yet wanting to be in the middle of a relationship, yet she was still very naive, her character. And Meg Ryan did a really good job at portraying more than one emotion at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Billy Crystal did too.
Yeah.
And because his whole character acts like he's not bothered by anything until he is. But, and maybe that's why men kind of seem extreme, is because it takes a lot to bother somebody. It depends on the man, I guess. But, in the case of Harry, the character, it took his ex-wife meeting him in a toy store for him to really be bothered by her, and then seeing all the interchanges and the facial expressions on his ex-wife and her boyfriend at that point, how disdainful they were of Harry and Sally. I'm like, no wonder he felt so bad.
Yeah.
So it was, and I'm sure I missed that the last time. I never encountered that the last time. I don't remember that. So it's been interesting to learn all of this stuff and just pick it up as I've gotten older and as I've healed, because it's a very necessary part of human interaction. It's it's
enriching too.
Well, it is, because you learn things about other people that you wouldn't have learned otherwise.
The depths.
Yes, exactly. There are depths.
You talked about that.
Well, and I talked about, like, my friends at work. One of my friends, she's half my age, well, less than half my age, and she is a deep person, but she doesn't yet have the wisdom and life experiences to feel as if she has worlds in her. And then my other friend, who's 10 years older than her, she has lots of experience, yet she's not quite so much a spiritual person as my younger friend. But then there's Michelle. And Michelle has worlds and experiences of worlds and universes. And Michelle is so deep compared to most other people I know that it would take numerous lifetimes, I think, to actually get to know her. Because which probably means the same way about me, because otherwise we wouldn't be together if we weren't two peas in a pod in that sense, But it's just interesting to see the differences in human beings. There's another blindness in autism called mind blindness, and mind blindness bars you from seeing the depth in human beings. It does. And it sounds like mind blindness only deals with the mind, but it doesn't. It deals with the emotions and the spirit of another person, which I never saw when I was autistic. Other autistic people might have or might, but I did not. And I have a feeling that most people with who are on the autism spectrum don't see the depths in NTs. They think NTs are all alike. God knows I've heard that enough.
Well, you saw cardboard cutouts.
That's what I did. That's what I saw. That's how people felt to me, as if they were just cardboard cutouts and just very two-dimensional. Yeah. And I think for a lot of folks on the spectrum, that is the case. not for all, but probably for the majority of. And because if you don't get the social/emotional, you're missing 90% or more of what's there, you know. So no wonder you only see cardboard cutouts, you know. But anyway, well, we're gonna leave off here for today, and then tomorrow we'll continue with was it GAPS diet, but we'll continue on more with that, or talk about whatever we want to talk about tomorrow. Either way, and it's fine. And guys, keep on with the celery juice. Keep on with the heavy metal detox smoothie. Keep on with the lemon water. Go to www.healyourautism.com and download the book. Buried Alive: One Man's Journey Out of Autism. That's our free ebook. And when you get done reading that, you're going to want to start your own healing journey. So then you can go to www.healyourautism.com/buy the book, BUY the book, and that's our guide to detoxing and healing, called Heal Your Autism's Do-It-Yourself Guide. Healing begins in your kitchen. And you go ahead and talk about coaching.
And we do coaching if you need any help.
And
thanks, Tie-Dye's Memes, for being with us today.
Exactly. And we will see you guys tomorrow then.
Have a great day.
Y'all too. Bye-bye.